Hi everybody, my name is Darpro. I'm a Sonic Adventure 2 Battle Speedrunner, and today we're going to talk about something that's not a tutorial, it's not a strategy, it's just kind of a theory. So, one of the things that you sort of see after a while is you start to see patterns in the way certain clips work, certain tech works, and they all sort of share across the different characters in the game, which I think is interesting. So I'm going to sort of put a theory out there, and I don't have any code reason why I believe it, and I don't have any proof of it, but I think it has a potential to be true, and I think it is reasonably testable. And better yet, now that we have a whole lot of people in the community who are capable of looking at code and looking at things inside the game, I think there is finally a position to be able to investigate it that we really haven't been able to do before, just because there weren't people equipped to do that available. So I'm just sort of going to put this out there, and we can see what people think about it. Maybe it'll turn out to be garbage, maybe it'll turn out to be pretty cool. But either way, I think it'll be interesting to put it out there and at least look back on it later and see what happens with it. So I'm just going to make a claim here. I'm going to make a claim that when a character in the game collides with something, the game does not seem to consider the collision of objects that the character is not facing. So if you can enter a situation where a character is colliding with two things, but only facing one of them, and I'm going to go ahead and guess, about a 180-degree arc in front of them, it'll ignore the collision of the thing that they're not facing, and you can clip through. This probably sounds pretty strange, but it comes as sort of a hunch after seeing a whole lot of different clips in the game that work in different ways, but all seem to come down to that one, not a rule, but a pattern. Let's call it a pattern. So, obviously I'm not going to expect anyone to believe that without any sort of evidence. So, what I did earlier was I recorded a bunch of different things that I had done before, and things that I had never done before, based on this theory that if you can engage in a situation where you're facing only one collision face, but you're colliding with two of them, it'll ignore the collision of one of them. And it turns out, it seems to be across the board fairly consistently true. So, if you just pick an arbitrary acute angle, probably you'll be able to clip out there, or at least clip through the wall. It may not be useful, but it'll at least be possible. So let's investigate some of the stuff that I had played around with earlier. So if I open up these video files, here's the first one. So one of the places that you can find a lot of these is these round red cylinders in Hidden Base, and other mech levels in particular. And so that's sort of where I started. I just said, well, if there's one up against a wall, if I can get into a situation where I'm facing the red tank, but just off slightly so that it pushes me in one direction, pushes me through the wall, when I'm not facing the wall, I should be able to go through, right? And this is what happened. So, you jump up, you face the container. If you do it just right, the wall doesn't work anymore. Here's another one. It's up against a wall, and if you hold just the right angle, straight through. Let's look at another one. So this one's a fun one. Again, you can almost walk straight through this one. It's up against a wall. You don't even need a hover. You can just jump straight through and you clip in. Not a problem. So these are all clips that I'd never done before, never attempted them before, and just said, okay, well, if I can engineer this situation, this should work, right? And bam, worked. Not much effort involved. Let's look at some other ones. Other mech levels that contain these cylindrical objects, not exactly the same, but pretty close. SA2's running in the background. So I looked at Sand Ocean, and there's actually a bunch of these in there. I only recorded one because it was the most fun. And yeah, you can jam yourself in here pretty good on either side if you want. The first one's actually not that hard to walk behind, but the second one you have to work your way through it. But if you do, you get in there pretty good. So again, another situation where you can sort of engineer your way out of it. But very interesting. Let's look at some other ones that I think are quite telling. Those are all mech ones. And I think they all sort of work broadly the same way. Hover's a good tool because it allows you to sort of change your hovering angle in midair, but it's very slidey, so you can get that momentum to be in a direction that you're not really pointing. So let's have a look at the one that actually got me started to think about all this. This is one that I didn't invent. In fact, I'm not even sure who found this. I saw this like couple of years ago, but I thought it was really interesting because at the time I thought it was the only way to get through level geometry, and I didn't know why. But it's very basic, very simple. It's in a wild canyon, and you can literally just jump straight through. It's not even a problem. It's just not an issue. So let's look at this one in slow motion, actually, if it will allow me. So, like, you have two pieces of level geometry. As far as I know, these are not objects. I guess they could be, but I don't think they are. This pillar and this wall actually make an acute angle. So if you face into the wall right after you jump, your momentum is going to still drag you into that red pillar, but you won't be facing it. So you just kind of phase through it. Try this one on your own. This one's really cool. So again, just jump and then like it's not even there. The game just doesn't care about that geometry. And I thought that was really, really interesting. So you can see here the pillar doesn't poke through or anything like that. So it may actually be an object. Either way, clip still works. It still fits the bill. So you can phase straight through the actual wall here and get into the void. Let's look at some more different ones that I think are pretty telling. This one's a familiar one that I think everyone will be used to seeing. So again, if you just hold the correct angle here, I'm definitely not being bad at this and definitely trying to show how it works kind of the same way. Totally not bad though. Definitely not bad. But you can see again, if you just hold exactly the right angle, you get out. And the geometry there is not exactly what it looks like. It's got this weird collision that doesn't really match what it's showing. So again, everyone's seen Cosmic Wall Skip, anyone who's seen a Dark Story run, but it really does handle exactly the same way, but you have the convenience of the hover never bringing you down to the ground, so you can just sit there until you eventually hold the correct angle and blam, you're out. And I'm fairly confident that this works the same way. It has all the hallmarks, it does exactly the same thing, it handles the same way, and so I'm more or less convinced that that, again, fits that same bill. Let's look at another familiar one that people have seen before. DC door clip. Very simple. Let's look at it in slow motion though, because this is actually the most interesting way to see this one. So, it seems like this is a 90-degree angle, and you think, okay, well that doesn't fit your bill, does it? And it's funny because in fast motion you wouldn't be able to see anything really, but in slow motion you can actually see something weird going on, particularly when you glide. So watch when I get crunched up against the door and I just glide. Watch what Knuckles does. I'm gonna slow it way down here. Watch right as he glides where he's facing. And now he's shifted direction totally. And he's out. For some reason, when you start the glide, he just faces at the door. And if you're holding just the right camera angle, or the control stick angle if the camera's off, he just slides straight through. And this is the most well-known one in Death Chamber, but all the other doors do this. You can slip into this corner right here on every single door. The only reason it doesn't work on some doors is because there's not enough door. Like, this door is not set inwards enough to get Knuckles fully out of range of these walls. There's a bunch of doors that would be amazing if we could clip through them, like Red Blue into Fire Dance. But you can't because this door is poking out too far, and there's not enough corner. Even though you clip into the corner, the wall is thick enough that it pushes you back out immediately. And so you can phase through this corner out into this area, but it doesn't help you. So you just end up back in bounds. But it does work on every single door, same way. But again, you can just see we're out, no problem. Here's another familiar one. Everyone's seen this one too. This is another interesting one to look at in slow motion. Again, you're facing into the corner, and then blam, he's out. And he goes towards the sign. It's a little bit weird though because, again, if we slow this... Oh, it's gonna kick me out. There we go. Sometimes it doesn't like it when I swap the speeds. So I'm gonna pause it right in the middle of when he does it. And again, you can see he's facing into the sign, but he's actually facing the wall just slightly. So it's why I believe that the arc where this happens is not exactly 180. I think it might be slightly less, but that doesn't, it may not be. That's purely a guess based on what I've seen. But what is pretty clear is that that object is pushing him straight through that geometry, and the facing angle does seem to have something to do with it, because it's basically right to the side, which is what we'd expect. So those are all the ones that I think are strong evidence to say that that this is the case. That objects, in particular, can push characters sideways through level geometry if their facing angle is not facing the geometry that they're supposed to collide with. Those are the main ones that I think are strong evidence to support this when they're examined closely. There's a bunch of ones that I have that are kind of Let's start with a fairly common one. These are all clips coming up that they're not obviously related, but they could be. It makes sense given how they kind of handle, but either the slow motion or the way that they handle isn't quite right. So I'm going to leave it up to you to think about it, but again, they act in a way that sort of makes you think, gee, I wonder. Here's one that everyone's familiar with, EE skip. This is not the door one. This is the setup kind. That's very important. The door is different. Although it may not necessarily be different. It may work exactly the same way. But this is the one that I chose to look at, because it again, handles really similarly. So, again, if we slow this down, it'll give me a second to get into position here. But pay attention to exactly what Tails is doing. And I want to point out something here. We're not facing forward. We are facing just slightly to the right of what you think would be forward in this section. So you would expect Tails to be able to go through the left wall if something provokes him to do so. As long as you continue facing, as long as you keep holding forward where he's facing slightly right. That is away from the left-hand wall. So let's slow this way down. And you can see I'm in the left, but I'm facing to the right. And again, bumped straight out like I'm not even there. And it doesn't look exactly like the other ones because he kind of stops and kind of jerks around. But it really has that vibe to it, where the object is pushing him in a direction he's not facing, and the collision just stops working. Let's look at another strange one. Let's choose this one. Here's hint clip. We'll look at this one in slow motion, might as well. These are all short. So what's going to happen is I'm going to spiral upper underneath this hint, and it's just going to push us straight out. I don't know how the collision of this object works, and it's really difficult to talk about which way Knuckles is facing when he's doing a spiral uppercut. I just don't know what direction that is, but again, it's an object. We got a piece of level geometry right next to it. It doesn't punch him all the way out, but it's not a very big object, so that's not surprising. The only reason this works is because there's a roof here to get out of, but it does push you just partially enough out of bounds that it stops caring about the wall. So you can see, well, I'm going to get the hint first, I think accidentally. Yep. I mean, totally intentional. Totally intentional. But yeah, again, just blam, out. And this is a point where you need to glide where you're out the roof. Because if you come back in, if you don't get the glide, you fall back in and you're in the wall's effect area. But I mean, you can clearly see the makings of this where that object is definitely winning over something. Is it the same thing where it's his facing angle that's allowing that to take place? I'm not sure, but it's possible. It's hard to tell. Again, you'll have to sort of make your own conclusions about that, but it's interesting to think about. Let's look at another one. This one doesn't really have to do with facing angle, but it is the case where an object is pushing Knuckles in a very strange direction, and it's potentially not a direction that the developer is expected to ever have to deal with. And so that's kind of why I pile it into the same category. I'll speed this one up because it's going to happen pretty slowly. Oops. Let's roll that back. So again, the door just pushes him straight out. Like, the level geometry is not a concern, and you're fully out of bounds. Totally out. Very simple. Again, I cannot show that that has anything to do with facing angle, but it is an interesting interpretation of the idea where you have an object pushing the character in a weird direction. Is it the facing angle, or is it something else? Is it just the object overriding it? I can't really say, but again, it's interesting to think about. It does seem related. Again, I'll sort of let you consider that one. Here's a real oddball. So let's do this one fairly quickly. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm actually going to get Shadow a negative speed, and he's going to be facing uphill. Not quite uphill, but definitely a weird direction. And what you'll notice when this happens is that this wall doesn't work directly inside it. You can wait until he gets all the way to the end. Oops is on it. I just decided to jump out, but you can quite clearly see when you do that, it just does not work. Just collision doesn't work. It doesn't know what to do. And I don't know if that's an artifact of the negative speed, or if it's got to do with his weird facing angle and the fact that an object, I believe this is an object, I can't prove that, but I do believe it, is pushing him into level geometry in a way that the collision maybe wasn't meant to deal with. Can I prove that's the facing angle? No. But it, again, does fit the bill where you're going in a weird direction and the collision just stops working. Doesn't work. Let's look at another familiar one. This one's a little bit tougher to demonstrate because it happens so fast. Let's slow this way down. This one is a little bit weird because it doesn't show as many of the hallmarks, but again, it's weird. Where you have an acute angle and just weird stuff happens. So I'm just going to walk up to it. You don't even need speed to do this. So I'm going to basically stop, adjust the camera, push up, and blam, out. And you can see just how kind of weird that is. I don't know why that happens in a downward direction, but again, it seems likely that an object is pushing the character in a direction that's weird through level geometry, and when that happens, if that movement is in a direction that doesn't seem forward, the level geometry just stops working. It doesn't do the job. Don't know why this one looks so weird. It happens very quickly. He doesn't seem to phase straight through it. He just pops. It's a little bit weird. So that one may not be the case that it's related, but it's worth bringing attention to. Here's an oddball. This one happens so strangely that it's hard to call what is and isn't related, but it was worth including because you see something that's just a little bit strange. Everyone's seen this. This is a Mission 3 tactic. And you just go, and you're out. Let's roll that way back. And go through pretty slowly, because this one's really hard to catch. In fact, I may not catch it at all if I didn't record it quite right. So you're going to jump up, skip the pads, jump up, and you're going to homing attack. And if you watch Sonic's position very carefully, he's out of the homing attack, he's just going to get bumped to the right. Yeah, you can barely see that, but he just gets bumped to the right and he's gone. He's out of the level geometry. Again, this one is extremely strange, but it does bear the hallmark where something pushes the character in a weird direction and then they're just out. And the level geometry that everyone is aware of and is familiar with just stops working. Don't know why. But again, it's really hard to call that one because the level geometry around that area is so wonky. It's really hard to tell, you know, what's what the shape of that entire area is. Maybe it is that there's just a gap, although it is very strange that dead sticking when you go there and homing attacking like that just works. If you hold the direction, it just does not seem to work. And to me, that spells that there's something to do with the facing angle, where you want the facing angle to stay what it is, and the game just handles it from there. Again, cannot prove it's related, but it has that smell. Alright, next clips are ones that are potentially long shots, but I think are worth bringing up. Let's lead off with this one because everyone's seen it. It's booty clip. You just jump and you're out. But I do want to bring some attention to this. So when you jump behind here, you're on the ground. You're basically being affected by both the wall hitbox, or collision, whatever you want to call it, and this golden goddess object collision at the same time. And what's really kind of surprising is that every single time the object wins. Every time. Let's slow this down just so you can see exactly where the clip happens, because it's basically already happened. You are out of bounds already, just standing on this surface between the two quote-unquote walls. But as long as you jump, you're already out. Watch this. When you jump... Come on, jump for me. He's out. That's just his hands. That's it. This is very similar to the hint clip in that you can basically glide out once you go above the roof, which he does, and now you're free to glide out, and you're fine because you've gone above this wall while partially out of bounds. And if you start gliding before this, you'll get kicked back in bounds because you're not fully out of the wall, but the wall stops here. Once you're above that, you're good to go. But this is another case where it's just like the object just pushes you straight through the wall. The game it just has no idea what's going on. Is it related to the actual facing angle? I don't know, but it does seem possible. If the game doesn't know what to make of your facing angle in that case, it would make a lot of sense that you could just do that every time. If it doesn't understand what your facing angle is related to the collision when you're in that sort of scenario, or if it thinks that you're pointing away from the wall, it's not really surprising that the wall doesn't work. At least with this quote-unquote theory. It's not much of a theory, but it's a theory nonetheless, I guess. Let's look at another one. This one is relatively new. I don't have a full, amazing understanding of it. But you can use those boxes to clip. And I clipped into the next box over, which is pretty funny. But you could go straight out of bounds from that if you wanted. But again, let's have a look at this in slow motion because it's pretty neat. I think almost everybody's had this happen accidentally to them, but only recently has it been sort of a consistentized thing. That's a word now. So again, flying down, and you clip into the crates, which itself is pretty weird, but then you're going to get pushed out of bounds by the object. Just blammo. Gone. And again, it seems not strange that this object would push you outwards, but it does seem strange that it would push you straight through the wall. It does not care that it's there. And I don't know that this is related to the facing angle theory, but it is interesting that once again, object versus wall, object wins. It seems to be a constant theme in this game. So, again, make of that what you will. Are they related? I don't know. Although it is interesting that they both kind of work in a related way. In a far related way. Those first clips are the ones that I think were the most relevant. These ones are kind of tangential and nonetheless interesting. Here's another one. This one's a super long shot, and this clip doesn't actually do a lot to help me provide support to it, but it is interesting. So let's look at this one in fast motion. Real fast motion. No, I'm kidding. In slow motion. But Pyramid Cave door clip. So I posed a theory some time ago that I think what's happening here is you've got level geometry here, and you have an object here. So my wondering was, well, you're actually facing slightly to the right. what if you're actually colliding through this tiny, 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 tiny corner with this object, and then the object is pushing you through the wall just like Death Chamber door clip? And I'd never done much to support that. I'd always just thought, I wonder if that's true. And in this case, this clip actually doesn't do a whole lot to help me support that. But I don't think it's dead in the water. I still think it's an interesting thing to think about, but this isn't going to do much to actually help me show anything. So if you look at this in slow motion again, real slow motion, this doesn't look very much like the Death Chamber door clip with Knuckles. So if you slow it way down, he just pops through. I've always been very critical of the idea that there's a gap here. Just because you would expect to be able to get stuck inside the door, and it's just never happened that way. Like, you'd expect it to be like a booty clip where you could get jammed inside there, and I've never been able to make it happen. I've only been able to go straight through. So my wondering has always been, well, what if you're facing this and you hit the side of the door inside the wall and get slid by that through the level geometry because you're hitting the side of an object and colliding with the wall at a weird angle where it just disregards the wall. And it really, the theory really fit the bill, but I'm not seeing this evidence fit quite nicely. The main reason that I'm not so sure that this is a thing is because this value changes throughout this process. So if you look at the X position, that would stop changing if you were dragging along the side of the door. But it never stops changing. Like, there's never a frame where it's the same as the next one or the previous one. And that implies to me that you're really not dragging on the side of the door. So that doesn't necessarily leave it dead in the water. It could be you're only contacting it for one frame. It could be that you're partially passing through it, or it could be that it's actually something totally different and I'm just stupid. That one's always a possibility, but it's, again, something kind of interesting to think about. Whether door clips like this are because of collisions through level geometry that is then overriding level geometry. It would explain why this trick is such a bastard to set up sometimes, and why it has to be done so precisely. Is because if you have to hit the exact right forward back distance and hit the left right distance just right, yep, that fits the bill for what we would expect. But again, this clip does not support that. It does not kill it, but it doesn't support it. So perhaps other evidence is necessary, but I don't have enough time tonight to dig it up. Anyway, let's go back and just look at one of the previous ones for a moment and sort of remind of what sort of the overarching theory here was that I think is totally supportable. I think it is totally defensible that if you have an object in a wall, perhaps two walls that form an acute angle, if you face one, you should be able to make the wall fail. Like in this case, if you can face the object in such a way that you're facing kind of just slightly away from the wall, it will no longer make the wall collision effective. Come on, me, you can do it. Yeah, you get that angle just right, and suddenly no collision. The wall is just disregarded. All those walls are just irrelevant. So that's the one that I think is totally defensible. And I think that you can arbitrarily do that. There's another one in Iron Gate that's used, I think, in an IL. But I tried that one and I'm too bad to do it. It's a little bit funky because you sort of get partially through the wall and then you have to go hover through the roof, and it's a bit weird. But again, looks exactly the same as this, does exactly the same. And I'm interested to see if anyone can find stuff that is legitimately useful with this, because if you could find ways to arbitrarily clip through any level geometry based on whether an object there fits a certain bill, you would be laughing. And if someone was able to find a way to do it on actual 90-degree angles, this game would fall apart like a stack of toothpicks. And I think that would be hilarious. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed me talking about a little bit of Theorycraft here instead of the usual tutorial and stuff. And I hope this has given people something interesting to think about and something interesting to play with, because I think that if you could find an overarching theory that sort of explains why so many things in this game are the way they are, I think you would find many more openings to be able to break stuff. And yeah, just being able to look at a level and say, oh, that's breakable, that's breakable, that's breakable would be pretty valuable. And I haven't been able to take it that far myself, but I think we're in the realm of history where someone might be able to take it from here and turn it into that. So hopefully that happens. But aside from that, give it a try yourself, guys, and see what you come up with. Thanks for watching.